CIET NCERT presents curriculum-based series Dhwani Shala. So let's join in Dhwani Shala Class 8.
Hello children, how are you? I am Amit Kumar Thakur, your friend. I hope that you are happy and healthy along with your family. I also know that you must be enjoying these days by playing a lot. But with this, we should also devote some of our time to our studies. You are at home, but I am here to facilitate your studies. Today, we will discuss the first chapter, How, When and Where of your Class 8th history book. So dear children, let's start. So children, let me ask you a very straightforward question. What is history about? Children, always remember, history is certainly about changes that occur over time. It is about finding out how things were in the past and how things have changed. Many of you might be having an idea that history means dates, some more dates, and a lot of dates. Then you can ask me, why was history associated with dates? So dear children, the association of history with dates has a reason. There was a time when history was an account of battles and big events. History was about rulers and their policies. Historians wrote about the year a king was crowned, the year he married, the year he had a child, the year he fought a particular war, the year he died, and the year the next ruler succeeded to the throne. For events such as these, specific dates can be determined. And in histories such as these, debates about dates continue to be important. Now, dear children, another question arises. Do you think that history is still associated with dates? Why? No, history is not associated with dates now. History is about changes that occur over time. But time does not have to be always precisely dated in terms of a particular year or a month. Sometimes it is actually incorrect to fix precise dates to processes that happen over a period of time. For example, people in India did not begin drinking tea one fine day. They developed a taste for it over a time. There can be no clear date for a process such as this. Similarly, we can't fix one single date on which British rule was established or the national movement started or the changes took place within the economy and society. All these things happened over a stretch of time. We can only refer to a span of time, an approximate period over which particular changes become visible. Having understood the relevance of dates in history, you can ask me another question. Which dates are important for history writing? Do these dates change with the change in perspective of history writing? Yes, children. The dates we select, the dates around which we compose our story of the past, are not important on their own. They become vital because we focus on a particular set of events as important. If our focus of study changes, if we begin to talk at new issues, a new set of dates will appear significant. After knowing what dates are important for history writing, we move to another very important question. Why do we divide history into chapters? So, dear children, when we write history or a story, we divide it into chapters. We do so to give each chapter some coherence. It is to tell a story in a way that makes some sense and can be followed. In the process, we focus only on those events that help us to give shape to the story we are telling. Here we will talk about James Mill. He was an important figure in the field of history writing in India. James Mill was a Scottish economist and political philosopher. In 1817, he published a massive 3-volume work, A History of British India. After knowing James Mill, another question arises. How did James Mill divide Indian history? In his famous book, A History of British India, James Mill divided Indian history into 3 periods: Hindu, Muslim, and British. Here again, we have to understand why do the terms through which we periodize become important. Or in other words, you can say, why do we try and divide history into different periods? So, dear children, it is very important to divide history into different periods. We try and divide history into different periods in an attempt to capture the characteristics of a time, its central features as they appeared to us. So, the terms through which we periodize, that is, demarcate the difference between periods, become very, very important. They reflect our ideas about the past. They show how we see the significance of the change from one period to the next. After understanding the importance of periodization, let me ask you another important question. Do you think that Mill's periodization of Indian history into Hindu, Muslim, and British was proper? What are the problems associated with this periodization? So, dear children, Mill's periodization of Indian history is not proper. In his idea of history, British rule represented all the forces of progress and civilization. The period before British rule was one of darkness. Can such a conception be accepted today? Obviously not. We can't refer to any period of history as Hindu or Muslim. In these periods, a variety of faiths exist simultaneously. We should not characterize an age only through the religion of the rulers of the time. To do so is to suggest that the lives and practices of the others don't really matter. We should also remember that even rulers in ancient India did not all share the same faith. Now, historians generally periodize the Indian history into ancient, medieval, and modern history. But now another important question arises. Dear children, do you think that periodization of Indian history into ancient, medieval, and modern is free from all problems? Let's see. Moving away from James Mill's classification, historians have usually divided Indian history into ancient, medieval, and modern history. But this division too has its problems. It is a periodization that is borrowed from the West, where the modern period was associated with the growth of all the forces of modernity: science, reason, democracy, liberty, and equality. Medieval was a term used to describe a society where these features of modern society didn't exist. We can't uncritically accept this characterization of the modern period. Under British rule, people didn't have equality, freedom, or liberty, nor was the period one of economic growth and progress. Many historians, therefore, refer to this period as colonial. Dear children, here the question arises: what do you understand by colonization? When the subjugation of one country by another leads to political, economic, social, and cultural changes, we refer to the process as colonization. Dear children, I think it is clear now to you what is colonization. After having understood colonization, please give answer to my next question. Do you think that the changes brought by colonization affect all the people in the same way? Dear children, all classes and groups did not experience the changes brought by colonialism in the same way. That is why our book is called Our Pasts in the plural. You know that history is written on the basis of sources. Now let's think over the question: what sources do historians use in writing about the last 250 years of Indian history? There are many sources for writing the history of modern period in India. Number one important source is the official records of the British administration. These records are available due to the following reasons. Number one, the British believed that every instruction, plan, policy decision, agreement, investigation had to be clearly written up. The conviction produced an administrative culture of memos, notings, and reports. Secondly, the British also felt that all important documents and letters needed to be carefully preserved, so they set up record rooms attached to all administrative institutions. Specialized institutions like archives and museums were also established to preserve important records. The second important source was the reports of following different surveys conducted by the colonial administration. Number one, by the early 19th century, detailed surveys were being carried out to map the entire country. Secondly, in the villages, revenue of surveys were conducted. Thirdly, the effort was to know the topography, the soil quality, the flora, the fauna, the local histories, and the cropping pattern. Fourthly, from the end of 19th century, census operations were held every 10 years. And finally, there were many other surveys such as geological surveys, archaeological surveys, anthropological surveys, forest surveys, etc. But again, an important question arises here. Do you think official records are reliable sources of history? From the vast corpus of official records, we can get to know a lot. But we must remember that these are official records. These official records tell us what the officials thought, what they were interested in, and what they wished to preserve for posterity. These official records do not always help us understand what other people in the country felt and what lay behind their actions. After understanding that we can't rely solely on the official records to know the history, then the question arises, what are the sources of knowing history of colonial rule in India other than the official records? So, dear children, there are many such unofficial sources also which are available for writing history. They are: number 1, diaries of people; number 2, accounts of pilgrims and travelers; number 3, autobiographies of important personalities; number 4, popular booklets that were sold in the local bazaars; number 5, newspapers; number 6, leaders and reformers wrote to spread their ideas; poets and novelists wrote to express their feelings in newspapers. Oral traditions of tribal people and villagers and other illiterate people are also sources of writing history. These are also unofficial sources or non-official sources. All these sources are more difficult to get than official records. If official records are not sufficient, then dear children, tell me, why did the British preserve official documents? The British believed that by preserving official documents, it would be easier for them or any other person to know about the decisions taken in the past. One can study the notes and reports that were prepared in the past. Their copies may be prepared and used in present time if needed so. That is why National Archives of India and national museums were established in 1920s. Now, dear children, can you tell me, how will the information historians get from old newspapers be different from that found in police reports? Well, children, the information printed in newspapers are usually affected by the views and opinions of the reporters, news editors, etc. They generally express the sentiments of the people. But what historians find in police reports are usually the views of police officers, which was always pro-government and anti-people. For example, we can look at the figure 7 of your textbook. The caption of the figure says, "Mutinous sepoys share the loot." In British representations, the rebel appears as greedy, vicious, and brutal. Similarly, the reports given in Source 1 and Source 2 of your textbook also bring out the clear contrast between the official reports and the reports published in a newspaper. Finally, dear children, we must understand the philosophies of J.S. Mill and other utilitarian thinkers of 18th and 19th century. So I must ask you, what were J.S. Mill's thoughts about the British rule in India? Or in other words, I may also ask, what do you think about white man's burden? J.S. Mill thought that all Asian societies were at a lower level of civilization than Europe. According to his telling of history, before the British came to India, Hindu and Muslim despots ruled the country. Religious intolerance, caste taboos, and superstitious practices dominated social life. British, Mill felt, could civilize India. Look at figure 1 of your textbook. This picture was made by James Rennell. He was asked by Robert Clive to prepare maps of Hindustan. The picture here tries to suggest that Indians willingly give over their ancient text to Britannia, the symbol of British power, as if asking her to become the protector of Indian culture. To do this, it was necessary to introduce European manners, arts, institutions, and laws in India. Mill, in fact, suggested that the British should conquer all the territories in India to ensure the enlightenment and happiness of the Indian people. For India was not capable of progress without British India. Figure 6 of your textbook shows 1830 drawing by James Prinsep depicting mapping and survey operations in progress in Bengal. All the instruments that were used in surveys are placed in the foreground to emphasize the scientific nature of the project. This was to create impression in the minds of people that only the British could ensure development of India by using science and technology. Finally, student, we should know the names of some important governor-generals and viceroys in India. Some important governor-general and viceroys were Warren Hastings, Wellesley, Lord Bentinck, Lord Dalhousie, Lord Canning, Lord Lawrence, Lord Lytton, Lord Ripon, Lord Curzon, Lord Hardinge, Lord Irwin, and the last viceroy was Lord Mountbatten. Now, dear children, your favorite segment of our program comes. It is quiz time now. My first question is, a history of British India was written by, and your options are A. Warren Hastings, B. James Rennell, C. James Mill, and D. Robert Clive. So, what is the correct answer, dear children? Yes, many of you can answer very easily. It is option C, James Mill. Now the second question. National archives and national museums are located in, and your options are Delhi, B. Bombay, C. Calcutta, and D. London. What's the correct answer, dear children? And yes, majority of you have given the correct answer. It is option A, Delhi. Now we move on to another question. Which practice was introduced by the British to know about the rural topography? And your options are A. Revenue collection, B. Surveying, C. Mapping, and D. Policing. So what's your answer, dear children? Yes, many of you have given the correct answer. It is option B, surveying. Now we move on to another question. Which institution was established by the British in 1920s to keep the records of important documents? And your options are A. Victoria Memorial, B. Parliament House, C. National Archives of India, and D. Supreme Court. What's the correct answer? Yes, you have rightly imagined. It is option C, National Archives of India. Now, next question. An important source of history of British rule in India is, your options are A. Oral evidences, B. Official records, C. Foreign newspapers, and D. Epics. What is the correct answer? Yes, you have rightly guessed. It is option B, official records. Now another question. At present, about what historians do not write? Options are A. How people earned their livelihood, B. What was produced, C. Social life of people, and D. Kings and battles. Yes, you have rightly guessed. It is option D, kings and battles. Historians generally don't write about kings and battles now. Now another question. How did many historians refer British period in India as? And your options are A. Modern, B. Colonial, C. Political subjugation, and D. None of these. Yes, you have correctly given the answer, and it is option B, colonial. Now, second last question. Who was the last Viceroy of India? Very simple question. We have discussed it. Options are A. Lord Irwin, B. Lord Canning, C. Lord Hardinge, and D. Lord Mountbatten. And yes, majority of you have given the correct answer. It is Lord Mountbatten, option D. And the last question, dear children. Who was the first Governor General of India? And your options are A. Warren Hastings, B. Robert Clive, C. Lord Dalhousie, and D. James Prinsep. What's the correct answer? Yes, many of you have given the correct answer. It is option A, Warren Hastings. So, dear children, I think that it is now clear to you that this first chapter of your class 8 history book aims to make you understand how important are dates, how do we periodize, what is colonial, what is the importance of official records, and what official records don't tell. With this, I conclude the first chapter of your class 8 history book. I hope you have enjoyed the discussion and learned a lot. So, dear children, keep dancing, playing, and enjoying at home, but also focus on your studies. I, Amit Kumar Thakur, will meet you in the next episode. Till then, tata, bye-bye.
You are just listening to curriculum-based programs Dhwani Shala. Production assistants Meenakshi Kukreti, Tanu Gupta, and Jagbandhu Jana. Recorded by Bati Langlingdo and Shanu Muksim. Produced by Ajit Horo. This program was brought to you by CIET NCERT, New Delhi, India.